good morning. Again, another episode of Detroit in Black and White. I'm Adolph Mongo, and here we are at McShane's on Michigan and Trumbull. Once again, want to thank Bob Roberts for letting us use his venue. Come on down sometimes and enjoy this breakfast on a nice rainy morning.
Right.
Vanessa Moss, the shit starter and the resident militant, is not with us today. She'll be back next week. Allan Lengel from co-founder of Deadline Detroit,
Hello.
Washington Post, Detroit News, and Eagle American.
Absolutely.
And sitting there once again, that guy that was named the police chief of the decade out of Trenton, Jim Nardoni. How you doing, Jim?
Good morning. If I was the only candidate.
No, there's been a lot of chiefs over there. But anyway, before we get started, I just want to pay tribute to a couple people that I had the pleasure of working with, and one sat right where you were, Allan, for 3 years. Brenda Hill. Brenda was she talked. She expressed her opinion, and you know where she was coming from.
She's the one on the right there.
And then Joanne Watson, who was my client, and she ran for city council, replacing the late Brenda Scott. Henry Madman wrote and produced the commercial that took Gill Hill down. Joanne was a great woman. Served 10 years on the city council, died unexpectedly last week. And Brenda, it was just a total shock that I talked to her during the 4th of July, and she did not, she didn't seem to be ill or whatever, but They found her. She was by her front door. And the first thing people ask, they say, "Where's Frank?" You have to know Brenda. Brenda had a little dog. His name was Frank. We go to the restaurant. We having lunch, and Brenda said, "I got to bring Frank some food." I said, "Frank eating better than most people on the street." And come to find out that, and she didn't tell anybody, she had to put Frank down. So Frank wasn't around when they went knocking on her door. They could hear him bark. And so people assumed, she wasn't home. So those two people, community activists, great in the community. We lost them too.
And Brenda, you were mentioning to me, Brenda went to Michigan State, and she was a swimmer at Michigan State, which surprised me.
Majored in biology. If you talk to her, you was like, "Yeah, Brenda out in the community, starting a lot of shit," and that was her. She raised her one of her nephews just like it was her son, and he was a student at Wayne State. Him and a friend who was also a student at Wayne State, and he was dropping her off at her apartment, and someone shot him, killed her. And she spent 10 years trying to find out who did it, etc. And that's how she got involved in mother of murdered children, Crime Stoppers. So she stopped working in the corporate world and became an advocate for those who lost loved ones in the city of Detroit.
Right. Yeah. She was definitely outspoken, and she had some misfortunes as well. She, I believe, her home
had a fire.
Had a fire at her home. Yeah. She had to move from there.
She ran for state rep.
State rep, right?
And they called it for her in the evening. The clerk, Wayne County clerk, called and said, "Congratulations, you the new state rep." And then in the morning, these votes came out of somewhere.
Yeah.
So Brenda will be missed.
Yeah. She was interesting, and she had a show on 9:10 a.m. on Monday nights. I think at 9 o'clock. Yeah. And she was an interesting woman.
Well, I'll go to you since you're our guest. Outrage of the week, Jim.
First off, I need to confess that cocaine is mine.
You were in the White House. I saw,
That's crazy. They keep talking about this cocaine like it could only be Hunter Biden. That's just nonsense. It could be anybody in the whole world. Anybody
it's unlikely it's Hunter Biden. They somebody I think planted it.
He would have used it.
Somebody Somebody planted it knowing that the narrative would be it's got to be Hunter Biden. He's, whatever, but it's like somebody knew enough to drop the cocaine somewhere where there were no cameras, where it was somebody on the inside. I think this is my theory, is as good as the Hunter Biden theory, that it was some Republican operative who dropped it somewhere knowing cameras couldn't pick it up and knowing the narrative would be, oh my God, yeah, Hunter Biden was there at the White House. It must have been him. Like,
Jim, you were law enforcement. If somebody found cocaine in my house and I had an open house, people come and go, am I responsible?
Well, they could probably get a search warrant for your house based on that evidence, but when you say are you responsible,
you would be charged.
You could be charged with possession, but they would have to get into your house. The issue is this: somebody, I understand where Allan's coming from, but somebody may have got to a checkpoint and thought, oh darn, oh shit, I've got this, I got to dump it. That's what I think happened. Somebody thought they were through a separate level of security.
Sure. It's a possibility.
The Secret Service is
I believe that, because when I went to boot camp in the Marine Corps, and when they were processing the recruits into that night, they brought in all the recruits at 2:00 in the morning. They shaved your head and whatever, and they said, put you in a room. They got a big empty container. They said, whatever you got, throw it in there, because we're not checking you. You'd be surprised what people was bringing to boot camp: knives, drugs, bags of weed and stuff. I'm like, why? Why would you do that? But people do.
Look,
that.
It's at the airport. You see people getting busted for guns, and they're like, "Oh my God, I forgot my gun was in my bag." People have drugs in their bags and stuff like that. So, I mean, there's so many theories, and they're all the least logical is that it's Hunter Biden, I think. But the other ones, as you say, that's a fair scenario. Or there's always the possibility that because Hunter Biden was recently in the White House, that
if that was his, he would have used it.
Right. It wouldn't have been full.
And so what if it was his? It wasn't his.
Right.
It'd be a 1 in a million chance that it was Hunter Biden. Why would he leave it there? He doesn't use that entrance.
Right.
It's
all set up.
Yep.
Okay, Allan, your outrage.
My outrage. We'll go to partly to Washington, where we see they had the hearing with FBI Director Christopher Wray and Jim Jordan. I mean, clearly, look, the FBI needs to be monitored. The FBI does have some abuses, like any military or law enforcement arm. There's always going to be somebody abusing something, or there's any company or whatever. We're going to see somebody dishonest, or So the FBI has done some things that aren't right, and they should be, but they do a lot of great stuff, really. And I've known a lot of FBI agents over the years, and the ones I've known have been honorable. I know there's some that haven't always been so honorable, but Jim Jordan has just made that all about Donald Trump. How can you go after Donald Trump? I mean, the document case, and why didn't you raid Joe Biden's house and tear it inside out? Well, everybody, Joe Biden, Mike Pence, they handed over the documents, and clearly, even if Trump had intentionally taken the documents, which it sounds he did, if he had just handed it over when the subpoena came, end of story.
But Trump did. He defies logic. If Trump would embrace the fucking vaccine, the COVID vaccine, he would have been reelected, I believe. And he went against. Those are his people that created this vaccine, and then he went against it. And then he almost died because he didn't believe that COVID was more than just the flu.
It's they talk about a lot during the hearing about a 2-tier system, unfair to Republicans or whatever. But I'm sorry, if any of us had taken those documents and then hid them and moved them around, we'd be in prison right now. We would have negotiated a sentence of probably a couple years or whatever, and we'd be behind bars. I mean, they don't put up with that shit, and they've bent over backwards. You talk about a two-tier system. I agree, two-tier bending toward Trump because they're afraid of, the shit that he stirs up, which he does. I mean, look, we saw, talk about another outrage, and we were talking about this before. All the Republican congressional candidates or Congress members in Michigan have endorsed Trump. Now, why would you do that except only to protect your job? Trump has lost the 2018 elections here, lost the 2020, lost the 2022, and they are backing him because they know in the primary he can knock them out.
He's a cult leader.
Yeah,
he's the man.
They're more inclined to lose their job, from my perspective.
And no question. And that takes me into my outrage. The Republicans, they on this woke shit. They think that now they beating up on the military, that it shouldn't be diverse. Tommy Tuberville,
yeah.
He made his living with black athletes. I mean, a great living. And now he's saying, "Oh, it's great to be a white nationalist. They're patriotic Americans. They should be allowed to join the military." Anybody know in the military, they weed out not only white nationalists, they weed out gangs, Bloods, Crips, and all these folks that are a danger to not only the communities, but to this country.
Right.
So whether they white, black, or brown, they don't allow that in our military. And now they saying, all these people are not qualified to be promoted to general, not qualified to even be part of the SEALs, not qualified. What they want to take a country back to where they just erase anybody that's different. And John James and those few black Republicans that's in Congress, there's 2 in Florida, there's 1 in Utah that played for pro football, Burgess Owens. If they buy into this shit, they can afford to do it because they represent a totally different districts. But John James, if he signs on to this, he needs to get his ass kicked out of Congress.
Well, it's disappointing for the future of this country, not just Donald Trump. There's a lot of cultists out there, and I think it's bad for this country.
No question. Let's take a break, and then we're going to bring in one of our first guests, Keith Johnson, former DFT president.
I'm Wayne County Treasurer Eric Sabri. We are living through unprecedented times. As a result, the Michigan Homeowner Assistance Fund was created. This fund, administered by the state of Michigan, is designed to help homeowners cope with pandemic-related hardships, such as delinquent property taxes. Residents may apply for up to $25,000 to help cover 2019, 2020, and 2021 tax years. Previous year's taxes must be paid in full or in a payment agreement with the Treasurer's office. Eligible homeowners must have a qualified financial hardship that occurred on or after January 21st, 2020. You must currently own and occupy your home as your primary residence and must have owned it since January 21st, 2020. To see if you qualify, please visit waynemetro.org, call 313-388-9799, or email taxinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
Okay, welcome back. I got 2 gentlemen here that not scared to speak their mind, and sometimes people say they talk too much, but they say I talk too much. Keith Johnson, how long was you president of DFT, the Federation of Teachers?
I was president for 8 years and in union leadership for 22.
And then we got Eric Brown. Eric is a strong advocate for literacy. not only here in southeastern Michigan, but around the country. Gentlemen, glad that you're here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Our school system, man. I go to you, Aaron. And not only, I'm not just saying Detroit.
Right.
I'm talking about as a whole here in Michigan.
I mean, you know, all over the country. It's unfortunate, and I think that people are definitely silenced when you get the national report card. Just appalls me because there are other issues that so many people waste time on. You know, just like recently, the past week, you know, all the issues going along with Keke Palmer. I get less than a damn about that. We need to focus on things that can move the needle in a positive direction for Black America. What's going on with Keke Palmer, her boyfriend, the baby daddy? I don't care about that.
Who is Keke Palmer?
She's
An actress.
actress, yeah.
Oh, okay.
She was, if you ever watched Tequila and the Bee,
Oh, that's her.
yeah, that's her.
Oh,
That's
she done
Keke
grown
Palmer.
up now.
Yeah, she's
She's
grown
grown
up, all grown
She's all
up.
grown it up.
Yeah.
But it was an issue with her, I guess, you know, the Usher concert. She got on stage. Her boyfriend didn't like what she had on. You know, she's a mom, new mom. But then, you know, you had people all across America, our people taking sides. And that is so irrelevant to the issues facing Black America. And we just spend too much time majoring in minors.
Wait, you know what someone told me?
That's my line.
Wait a minute. Someone told me that where they worked at a restaurant that some of the people in the back couldn't read the orders because they couldn't read.
Oh, they,
You
Yeah.
know, Keith, you've been a stark defender of educators here in Detroit. What's the problem?
There are several problems. I think that one of the most fundamental problems is the fact that we've gotten away from some of the very basic instruments of reading in this case. You know, when Eric and I were coming up, when you were coming up, we learned how to read phonetically. And then a number of years ago, for some reason, for some unknown reason, they abandoned phonics. And now they're moving back towards it. But then when you look at Detroit specifically, there are a number of inhibitors to children's educational growth, not the least of which is truancy and transiency. When I retired 7 years ago, there were 24% of our students who attended 3 schools or more during the course of the school year. So they didn't have that consistency. The average daily attendance, even today in DPS at all grade levels, is around 78%, which means that on any given day at any grade level, you have about 22% of your children who are not there. If you don't have that consistency in learning and having the opportunity to practice what is taught to you and implement it, then you're lost. And as we know, reading is fundamental to any other aspect of learning. If you can't read, you can't do math, you can't do science, you can't really do anything except play in gym.
So and some of these schools don't have gym. How do you stop the bleeding of DPS? Where when I moved back here in Detroit, you had almost 200,000 students sitting right there inside the city of Detroit. What is there left today?
Well, now we're down to somewhere around 49,000 students. And when I graduated in 1972, we had something like 280,000 students. We had 320 buildings. You know, I ended up graduating from Henry Ford High School, and we had over 4,000 students at Henry Ford. Now Henry Ford has maybe about 500. Cass Tech, which I got kicked out of March 23rd, 1971 at 1:30 p.m., but not that I remember. We had over 6,000 students, and we had actually staggered schedules at that time because you couldn't have all of us in the school at the same time. I said all that to say this. As our city population continued to diminish, then obviously the number of students in our schools diminished. But the greatest impact, in my mind, upon DPS was emergency management. when you took the power of the management of the schools away from the people and you put it into the hands of people who were not educators, the politicians, and they looked at it as a business. We went from having superintendents to having CEOs. You know, we aren't a company. We weren't a corporation. We were an education system. And so now that we now have an elected school board and we now have a superintendent, I like the progress that we are making. But Adolph and Eric, we were down so damn low.
And in my opinion, you're still low.
We are still low.
Eric, let me ask you this: how will that ruling by the Supreme Court on affirmative action, how will that play a role in our kids?
I mean, I wasn't fazed by that. You know, people get offended when I say that. And the reason why I say I was not fazed by it is at the end of the day, learning is responsibility of parents ensuring that their kids learn. Learning is responsibility of kids going to take their ass into the classroom and paying attention to learn. That's not what's happening. We all say it starts at home, but at the end of the day, part of the problem is starting at home in this society is you have a lot of uneducated parents.
Right.
You know, so you had people have to understand this. We were not impacted by that ruling, but I find it amazing that people in Michigan are bitching and moaning about that ruling when in 2006, when the affirmative action issue was on the ballot, it went down in front. It went down in flames here.
Right.
You know, you had a governor that won by a landslide.
Yeah.
You had that initiative go down by a landslide, but people didn't say a damn thing. But now they want to act like brand new with regards to what happened in Washington, D.C. and blame it on one person. Clarence Thomas is not the reason why why that initiative went down in flames, because had it not been him, it would have been another Republican on the Supreme Court, and they would have voted the same way. So the dismissiveness of Black people towards Clarence Thomas as if he's the reason for that decision is laughable to me. We have so many other things we need to be worrying about in America as Black people. We can't continue to let education, when slaves, our ancestors, could not read. They were beaten if they were learned or they were taught how to read. We should be the preeminent race in America when it comes to education. That should be our priority. It makes no sense that 5 years ago, 12.7% of third graders, only 12.7% were proficient in reading in Detroit. 5 years later, that number is down to 5%. And people want to blame COVID. No, those numbers were in existence prior to COVID and the pandemic. So that means that you're just moving these kids along. And I have a problem with the rollback of the third grade law. That should still be in existence.
Well, that's where you and I just disagree, Eric. Because
Keith, you have third graders 5 years ago.
How many times can you flunk a person?
As many, they pass them along. They are just passing these kids along. You're not doing them any favors. And I just gave the number 5 years ago, 12.7%. Those were third graders.
Right.
They're eighth graders. Not only 5% of them are proficient in reading. So if you're just passing them along,
but is it part of this generation? You know what? I got beat up on one show when I said the Detroit mayors that I work with. Coleman Young had a lot of books in his office, well read. Even when I met with Dennis Archer, well read.
Well read.
Now, when I was a consultant for Kwame Kilpatrick, I had nothing. You know, he got pictures and all, entertainers and stuff. But not to say, he was smart.
Well, very smart.
But he wasn't real read. And they didn't know the history of this or the history of that. And you need to know those things. So we got a generation, they can't write a sentence. They don't talk to each other because what they do.
Everything is texting and on Facebook and Instagram and all of that. But I think that one of the things that we must come to terms with, and Eric kind of alluded to it, is the fact that we have engaged in what I call assembly line education for too long. And I'm not going to try to justify it, but I am going to try to explain it. When you have superintendents who come down on principals, who come down on teachers, because they're failing too many students or too many students are failing, then in order to get away from that, you're passing them along. Now the other issue that I take with Eric on this regarding the proficiency in reading, and a lot of that is predicated on standardized tests. And we have to remember that children do not have standardized minds. I know from my days as a classroom teacher, there were students that I had who knew subject matter backward and forward, but you put a test in front of them, they go blank. In addition to that, some of the kids who are like in 8th grade, 11th grade, when you bring that test in front of them and they ask, is this going to affect my grade? Well, no, it doesn't affect your grade. Then they don't give a damn about it. We have to change that mindset. We have to change that mindset.
But we got to be honest also, because you have to understand, Asians as well as Middle Easterners and Hispanics are all performing better than Detroit public school students, and that's their second language. So it's no excuse for black kids in Detroit.
I agree. I agree with you.
You know why? The Asians win the spelling bees? Because they practice.
Right.
I mean, I live in Canada.
You know why? But black athletes dominate.
They practice.
They practice.
So
they practice.
what Allan Iverson say,
practice.
So if you practice in reading, if you practice in writing, you know, in a minute, Keith, AI is gonna take over the teaching.
You know,
or whatever.
When I have spoken with young people, and before I came back into the workforce, I used to go to schools and talk with young people. And I'll tell them, look, how many of you recognize the fact that you have a difficult time reading? And a lot of them would raise their hands. Then read something that interests you. I don't care if it's a comic book. Learn to read something. You know, go to a dictionary.
What about making library cards?
Mandatory. It was mandatory for us.
But it being mandatory and people using them.
And then using them.
But you know what? We run out of time.
Already?
Yeah, man. You know what? We're going to have a whole show.
Yes.
And talk about the state of education.
Yes.
Not only in Detroit, but in Michigan and
in this country.
In this country. When India is producing thousands and thousands of engineers every day, in America, what, 100, 200 or whatever, you can count them on your fingers.
And how many of them look like us?
Not many.
Not many. The role that literacy plays in so much in society is amazing. So you can have a conversation about this all day, every day. It's still a matter of getting people to understand the importance of literacy, reading, and moving themselves.
But you know what's confounding to me? We have some of our kids who have technology literacy. Oh, yeah. They know how to do anything on this phone or on that computer.
Well, I should tell you, it's like I used to tell students that were great at playing instruments but hated math. I said, you doing math already?
Exactly, right? Yeah.
So we're gonna leave it at that, gentlemen.
Thank you, Adolph.
Eric Brown, a literacy advocate. Keith Johnson. You know, I can call him all kinds of stuff. but one thing I can say, passionate, led the unions, even in some turbulent times.
Yeah, the most turbulent times in DPS history.
No question. Let's go to a commercial, Henry. And
I'm Wayne County Treasurer Eric Sabri. We are living through unprecedented times. As a result, the Michigan Homeowner Assistance Fund was created. This fund, administered by the state of Michigan, is designed to help homeowners cope with pandemic-related hardships, such as delinquent property taxes. Residents may apply for up to $25,000 to help cover 2019, 2020, and 2021 tax years. Previous year's taxes must be paid in full or in a payment agreement with the Treasurer's office. Eligible homeowners must have a qualified financial hardship that occurred on or after January 21st, 2020. You must currently own and occupy your home as your primary residence and must have owned it since January 21st, 2020. To see if you qualify, please visit waynemetro.org, call 313-388-9799, or email taxinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
Right, Ray 72.
Welcome
back.
We are back.
Yeah, welcome
we
back.
Are back.
I'm Adolph Mongo, Allan Lengel, Jim Nardoni. Welcome back to Detroit Black and White. Keith and Eric, they were good. We can talk about education all we want to, and we can have a whole show on education. There's no question. Biden raised $72 million.
Wow.
You know,
Good for him.
I had a discussion with Jim the other day, and Jim said Biden is a fraud. Go ahead.
Well, I didn't say it was a fraud. I just look back at history, and I just think he's what people settle for, and I think that's bad for this country. We can't settle for Donald Trump or Joe Biden anymore. That's why I am really happy that we have a third candidate, at least a third and a fourth candidate. And it's interesting. I listened to a little clip on Dr. West the last couple of days that I thought was fascinating. He talked about gun violence, and he talked about California back in the 60s. Can you talk a little bit about that, Adolph?
Well, you know, the Black Panthers, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, they start open carry was legal in California, so they start following the police with semi-automatic weapons. Yeah, man. So police, they all upset. This is the first time the NRA said we for gun control. Unbelievable. But Reagan had got elected governor of California, so they got a bill going in the House in California, in Sacramento, talking about making it illegal for people to carry guns in the open. The Black Panthers went up there to protest. They went in this door in the Capitol, and I've seen the Sacramento Capitol. They went in the wrong door. They were on the floor of the House with armed weapons, scared the hell out of folks. I'm gonna tell you, you know, they passed that bill so quick, and the NRA supported it. Yeah.
Well, you know, I won't disagree with you that we can't. I mean, we can do better than Joe Biden and Donald Trump, but you know, the idea that I hate to say it. I mean, ideally, it'd be nice to have more than two parties, because it's really the two parties have sort of a rotted system there. The Republicans have particularly gone off the rail with Donald Trump. But that being said, I mean, the thing that concerns me about these, you know, Dr. West and some of these other people is that they and I love that he calls us, you know, his vanilla brothers. But you know, as Saeed Khan said, he refers to the French president as the French vanilla brother. But I think they're going to act as spoilers, and spoilers, as we've seen. I mean, look, if Donald Trump ends up in office again, I think it's just going to be a disaster. But
look at Israel. They got 5 parties got together, and they got a crazy man.
And now they got a Trump guy who's a little more sophisticated than Trump, but he's got all the same ethics as Trump. I just think I think it's great. We should have a choice, and we should have better choices than what we have right now, but we don't. And I don't know if part of it is who wants to subject themselves to that craziness of, first of all, an incredibly stressful job, but also the scrutiny of the press. Most people are like, I don't want me or my family to be subjected.
He can't win. You know, Cornel West cannot win.
Of course he can't win, but he brings different ideas. So when he was talking about gun control, he said he's an abolitionist for poverty. He said guns are nowhere where I would start this argument. Guns are not that relevant. And you know what? I agree with him. What we're doing with gun control
is relevant. When you ask the kids and the relatives of the kids that died in Valverde, or the people that died in the supermarket in Buffalo, or the folks that was in the synagogue in Pittsburgh,
right?
The people in the movie theaters in Colorado, guns is a big deal.
Well, let me tell you a little story. There's a little company in Michigan. I'm not going to mention their name, but they built bolts and a little machine shop up near Lansing, actually. And you know what they did? They decided to build AR-15s because there's a lot more profit in it. And I'm going to tell you this: they can build an AR-15 in their garage, whether it's legal or not legal. They don't need the government to tell them what they can and can't do.
But
I'll throw this question.
you know what? The one thing I'm going to say, and I'll say this. First of all, we've got to get the AR-15 gun population, the total gun population, start somewhere. But the problem is what we see in like Virginia Tech and places like that, where we've seen mass shootings, where we see these nerdy guys who don't have the street smarts to figure out how to get stuff on the black market. And maybe they can't build stuff, but they're tougher to build. But when you can walk down the street and go to a gun shop or go to the Walmart or whatever and buy it, it's hard to say gun control saves lives, because we don't know how many lives are saved by making it more difficult to get guns in people's hands. But we've got to start somewhere, and if you talk to the ER doctors and stuff, they'll tell you how much more damaging AR-15s are.
But let me tell you something. Americans did not did not go against the war in Vietnam until they start seeing dead bodies on TV. Now, if we want to shock some folks into doing something about these guns, I think you should start showing the victims of these violent attacks on citizens in this country.
The reality is this little precious, beautiful little angel baby that died 2 years old, the terror, the fear that she must have felt. She was killed with a phone cord. I don't see them asking for people to turn in their phone cords.
Well, you know what? I also don't see like mass murders with phone cords, guys running into shopping malls and strangling people with phone cords. I mean, that's not a fair analogy. You can kill anyone. We're going to take away people's fists.
Let me throw this down, and I'll start with you, Allan, and then Jim. People talking about gun control, how we can get the guns off the street. It don't seem like this is the main issue in this upcoming presidential election. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, it's so shameful. The NRA. I mean, it looked like for a while the pushback on the NRA was being effective, but now the NRA is so impactful in Washington. Look, the ATF director. We finally have a permanent ATF director. I can't tell you how many interims they've had because the ATF did not approve of the nominations that the president's put forward.
You're talking about the NRA?
No, I'm talking the NRA. Yeah. The NRA. Well, I'm saying the NRA had to approve the appointments of ATF directors, and the ATF directors who were particularly more about gun control and enforcing the law, and even just enforcing the laws on the books, they were rejected by the NRA. And it's, the NRA has a lot of power there.
Jim, I'm not against regulation. You're talking about regulations, whether I'm not really in favor of red flag laws because I don't believe they work. There's been red flag laws. I will tell you this as a street officer, you had a choice a lot of times. Do you want to go to jail? I can lock you up, or you can give me your firearm. That's been going on. That's going on all over this country right now. Police officers walking into a house and a guy's fighting with his wife or husband or whoever, and they're saying, "Look, there's been no blows thrown. Nobody's been slapped. It's just threats." But I see that you have a AR-15 in the closet. Would you mind handing us that AR-15? You can come down to the police station in about 5 or 6 days and pick it up. So we just created a law, a red flag law, to do some of that stuff. That's been going on since the beginning of firearms. Prohibition doesn't work. Go to your jeweler. If you're looking for a Rolex watch, go to your jeweler. You can't get one. It's a 3-year wait. So when you take things out of the hands of the public, you know what they do? They find a way to get their hands on them. Whether it's go try and buy a brand new Corvette right now. They're charging $25,000 over sticker. Remember when you went to a dealership and they would get their calculator out and they would give you a number? Well, and you
and that bullshit story that they let me go talk to the manager and come back. They already talk to the manager.
Right. But you know what?
They don't. People do not care. People do not care about whether or not you're gonna take the guns off the table for the election. So it doesn't matter.
So I looked this up last night. 223 people died in 2018 in California. They were stabbed to death. You know how many people died from a rifle in California in 2018? 22. So 10 times more people were stabbed to death and killed by a rifle, and we're trying to outlaw rifles. My point is, it's just political. It's not a solution. You can take AR-15s off. There's 20 million of them out there. You can outlaw them. It's people control. That's what gun control.
But we saw when there was a ban on AR-15s that the murder rates did go down. And here's the thing, Jim. When you talk about people are going to find ways to get stuff, I agree. But let's take a pool of 100 people, and because you've made it more difficult, maybe 80 of them still find ways and 20 others don't because it's not easily accessible. So we've got 20 people without those weapons. And, you know, it's hard for us to actually see what doesn't happen, what we avoid, but we have to, there's a possibility that there's 20 less crazy mentally ill people out there, and not to, you know, disparage mentally ill people, but they tend to be the ones who are committing these mass shootings.
Well, you know, we don't care about having these facilities anymore, thanks to here in Michigan, Governor Lengel, who closed them all, and you see Lafayette Clinic turned into a charter school, and all these other places. It closed down Northville and Pontiac,
Northville, Lafayette Clinic,
where you gonna
see? That's the thing: is that Republicans say it's not a gun thing, it's a people person, it's a mental health issue, and yet they're the ones cutting mental health care wherever they can. So they're refusing to address the mental health issue. They're refusing. I mean, what does it take after in Connecticut when all those children were killed? I thought that's going to be a pivotal point for us taking guns seriously. And you know, when we talk about people criticize and say Chicago has tough gun laws, New York, DC have tough gun laws, and yet there are a lot of guns there. Well, yeah, in DC, all you have to do is travel 5 minutes and go across to the Maryland border, the Virginia border. In Chicago, all you have to do is travel outside of Chicago or go to Indiana, go to Ohio, and you can get guns. So it's like, it can't be.
Buy a gun across state lines. Against the law, you have to buy a state in the state that you live in. It's absolutely against the law for me to go to Ohio and buy a gun.
But do you think people care?
They won't. A federal licensee will not sell a gun to you. That's the press telling you that I'm going to Ohio and buying a handgun.
It used to be, Jim, that English police did carry guns.
Well, how's this? The people in Ohio are buying lots of guns and then selling them to people in other jurisdictions who are coming. Wow. I mean, like murder of a gun. It's just we can't keep going this way, and it's so commonplace now. We have mass shootings every fucking week, and we don't do a thing about it.
Okay. On that note, Henry, let's run a spot, and then we come back to down the stretch.
I'm Wayne County Treasurer Eric Sabri. We are living through unprecedented times. As a result, the Michigan Homeowner Assistance Fund was created. This fund, administered by the state of Michigan, is designed to help homeowners cope with pandemic-related hardships, such as delinquent property taxes. Residents may apply for up to $25,000 to help cover 2019, 2020, and 2021 tax years. Previous year's taxes must be paid in full or in a payment agreement with the Treasurer's office. Eligible homeowners must have a qualified financial hardship that occurred on or after January 21st, 2020. You must currently own and occupy your home as your primary residence and must have owned it since January 21st, 2020. To see if you qualify, please visit waynemetro.org, call 313-388-9799, or email textinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
Okay, we back. How can someone catch our show, Allan?
All right. Well, we are broadcast on YouTube on both the Detroit in Black and White and also on Deadline Detroit. A lot of the platforms are also using Deadline Detroit. You can also see it on Twitter. You can see it on my LinkedIn page. We also have a website called DetroitinBlackandWhite.com. The shows are posted afterwards on there. They're also posted on Deadline Detroit. So if you go to Deadline Detroit, you can also watch it there.
We're on Facebook Live.
We're on Facebook Live. We're on Facebook on Detroit in Black and White and Deadline in Detroit.
Okay.
So there's a lot of different ways. And if you don't catch it live, you can watch it recorded on all these different platforms. So,
okay.
And it stays recorded on Facebook as well. You can go there. But like I say, we have, if you want to see the whole history of any of our shows, you can go on DetroitinBlackandWhite.com, and we have every show from the very beginning. We have it both. You can also listen to it on a podcast. If you go to any of the places where you would find your podcasts on Apple or wherever, you can download the podcast as well. So
that's a lot of work.
Yeah, so there's a lot of opportunities to see Detroit in Black and
We
White.
appreciate everybody out there.
And if you want to subscribe to all our, we have a Facebook page, we have a Twitter page, we have a lot of, all the social media pages. We're not on Instagram because they don't allow to do that.
Instagram, Telegram, or what, but anyway.
Tell us who we're right. Tell us where we're wrong, because we're wrong sometimes.
Yeah. Jim, next year, what are you looking forward to in the presidential election?
I think I have to think about that for a second.
Seconds over.
I'm not sure that I'm very optimistic about the presidential election at all. I think that people have just decided. We always say that, right? We pick the least worst person. It's a stomach ache or a headache, and that's kind of where we are right now.
You don't like Grandpa? Grandpa, and so far
he's done better than people expected.
I think he was a decent senator about 30 years ago.
But he was in bed with his arms around it, kept her right there.
But I'll tell you that each person who attacked Joe Biden during those debates lost out because people had sympathy for this older guy, and they were being so aggressive on him.
I don't think they have sympathy now. I think that the choice of, do you want a crazy man or do you want an old man? I think that's the choice.
So you're saying it's going to be between Cornel West and
No, I think Cornel West, he play a role, and I think his role is he wants some leverage. He wants to be a major player, and if he gets 10% or 12%, he don't go away. He's like a bad check. It keeps bouncing back. That's what he want to do.
Well, I think we always see, like in 2000, people said, no difference between Bush and Al Gore. I'm tired of this choice. I'm going to vote for Ralph Nader. Well, all those people then had, buyer's remorse when Bush got elected. Then same thing with Trump in 2016. They said, no difference between Hillary and Trump. I'm going to vote for Jill Stein or whoever. And then they said, holy shit, there was a difference, even though Hillary Clinton was not the most likable candidate.
Hillary Clinton, you know what? In a way, I was glad she didn't win. I didn't know Trump was going to be that bad. Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, they the most arrogant assholes in America. They just thought that oh, you know, Clinton's the first black president. We got all the black folks, and they got upset because Obama got a lot of support, and they're like, why are you supporting Obama? You know, and you saw the real Bill Clinton. You know, that neck turned red during those primaries, and they lost only because they just took their base for granted. Then campaign
Hillary.
in Michigan, then campaign in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Pennsylvania.
It's shocking because I always think of the Clintons as being true students of the American political system. Like Bill Clinton, I think, studied JFK. And so I was kind of shocked how poor of a campaign they ran. And I don't know if they used James Carville, but I think James Carville is one of the smartest political
No, they didn't
operatives.
use him on that. And then, listen, if she would have won, we'd have saw Chelsea become a senator. Oh, man. I was like, they had, you know what? In a way, I wanted her to win. I voted for her. And then in another way, just go away. You know, she just thought she was entitled.
So you talk about the former President Clinton,
yes,
taking his voters for granted.
And of course,
are you suggesting that the current president,
Joe
Biden, is or is not taking his
well, if they
for
smart,
granted?
if the Democratic Party is smart, they won't. You know, he raised $72 million just like that. They got money. But if they play the Democratic strategy like they always do, we don't spend any money in Detroit or Flint or Saginaw or Benton Harbor. You know, they go to these little small towns and shit. They spend all their money on consultants. Well, we don't need this. And then at the end, when they find out that they about to fall apart, then they start throwing dollars around.
I think John James was Macomb County was a typical thing. They were told, don't bother. This can't be won. I mean, John James outspent Carl Merlinga, the former judge and former county prosecutor, 5-1. And I mean, John James bombarded the airwaves. He barely won. It was a razor thin. If they had spent anything on Carl Merlinga, and I think this time they're going to come back and go after John James.
They should have put the pressure on Carl Merlinga. He shouldn't have been the fucking candidate.
Yeah, well,
Carl Merlinga is a piece of whatever.
He's a brand. He's a brand out in Macomb.
Fuck Carl Merlinga. He shouldn't have won. But you know
he didn't win.
But the Democrats have been handed everything here in Michigan. The Republicans had the nuts. They got a
Christina Caramo.
Yeah, got a nutcase running the party.
Well, I didn't think it was over until the Republican congressmen and women decided.
Tudor Dixon for president.
Decided to endorse Donald Trump right at this point.
They just
committed
suicide. They committed
kamikaze.
Yeah, they it's like at the end, okay, let's die.
There's so many better candidates out there in the Republican field. They have a huge field this time. There's some, decent candidates out there. Why would you immediately? I know why they would, because they see Trump is likely to be the winner.
And they won't be careful. They got 4 seats that they flipped in New York, and that's in the swing districts. And if one, what you got?
George Santos.
So they flipped
That's
back to
gonna
the House.
Yeah.
I see. This is what I see: the House going back to the Democrats and the Senate back to the Republicans. Because I see that.
Yeah. I see.
So
I mean,
Manchin seat is dead. The guy in Montana, he living on life support.
Yeah.
But Lindsey Graham started this. I think a lot of this is responsibility of Lindsey Graham. When he said after January 6th, if this is the way it is, I don't want any part of it. And then 3 days later, he's playing golf with Donald Trump. Or 4 days later, that's
he's
the
afraid
biggest
of
disappointment of a human being.
You know what?
They love to give Donald Trump a blowjob. That's what Donald Trump wants.
Rolling Stone had a great piece on Lindsey Graham. This was several years ago. And it said, Lindsey Graham needs a lion in his life. So he had John McCain as his lion. When John McCain passed, he was looking for a new lion, and he found it in Donald Trump, unfortunately. I mean, at least John McCain had some, ethical barrier, boundaries or whatever. He's a weak politician, but he's survived all these years, and it's shameful.
Well, guess where he's from? South Carolina, man.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. Shit, Tommy Tupperville.
Tommy
Insane.
Tupperware.
Insane.
But that was the beginning of the dominoes. If he would have stuck by his message and said, "We're done with this guy if he does this stuff. We need to go in another direction."
But
and on the other hand, the Democrats too.
Donald Trump is he immortal.
Well, no, Lindsey Graham could have been beaten in this last one, and he probably would have if Trump turned on him, and he knew that. He did not want Trump coming after him. He was vulnerable in that way, and he just stuck with Trump.
Well, you know what? We're gonna continue to see what all these candidates that we can get, or Robert Kennedy, and he might. You know what? He might do some damage to Grandpa.
Well, here's it's interesting if we talk about election denying. We have Ronna Romney McDaniel, who dropped her name Romney, so at Trump's request.
We have a video.
Yeah, so we have her on CNN.
When did you stop being an election denier?
I think saying there were problems with 2020 is very real. I don't think that's election denying. I mean, Chris, I'm from Wayne County. We had a woman send a note saying, "I'm being told to backdate ballots." We had to look into that. That's deeply concerning. When you have friends who are poll watching and being kicked out, that's deeply concerning. We have every right to look at that. And I think everybody should have a little more concern about, listen, look at Pennsylvania.
Wait a minute. Are you saying, as the chair of the Republican Party, that you still have questions as to whether or not Joe Biden was the duly elected president?
Joe Biden's the president.
No, I didn't ask you whether he's the president.
No, I don't think that. I think
Do you
there
think
were lots of problems.
he won the election?
I think there were lots of problems with 2020.
Do you think
he won the election?
Pardon?
But ultimately, he won the election. But there were lots of problems with the 2020 election. 100%.
And that's fair.
But I don't think he won it fair. I don't. I'm not going to say that.
People. All right.
When did you stop being?
So, anyways, she brings up, first of all, she says the ballots were backdated. The Secretary of State addressed that right afterwards. There was some problem where it wasn't recorded properly, so they went and corrected it. And then also she talks about people being kicked out. There were people who left the building. There were always Republican observers in there. She's trying to make it sound like they pushed everyone out, which is total bullshit. She knew that, and she continues to do that because she's another person who loves her job so much that she won't stand up for the right thing. And if you talk to people who know her, she privately, right after the election, admitted Trump lost, but she knows if she wants to keep her
How
job.
much she making?
That's a good question. We should look that up, but it's she wants to keep her job, so she's willing to say anything. She's afraid of Trump.
But it's always about the job. It's always, when people say it's not about the money, it's about the money.
It's the kiss of death.
But anyway, as we come to a close, we're going to continue to talk about next year's election.
She made $358,431.
That's 300,000 reasons why she's with Donald Trump.
Yeah,
So,
and that's then it says the highest yearly salary she received from the RNC was $410,000, which she got paid in 2020, but it's gone down a little bit.
And you don't know what she's taking under the table.
Right.
So anyway,
so it's a good job, and I have to believe she's using it as a platform to eventually run for governor in Michigan.
Okay.
Or Senate.
Okay, Jim, your final thought.
My final thought is mistakes are sometimes made in elections. They're usually small mistakes, but to accuse, it would have to be a huge conspiracy for these clerks all over the country to throw an election. I don't see it.
But people do. I can name some elections here in Detroit where they threw out all these ballots. It's questionable, but what they're talking about didn't happen. people didn't fix the machines, etc. Allan, your final thoughts.
My final thoughts I'm going to say real quick. If you get emails, which I've been getting emails saying that I purchased a computer through Amazon or I bought something through PayPal, don't fall for it. It's total BS. You call the number, they say, okay, we're going to fix that. They tell you to type something in your computer. They want to give you a code so they can get third-party access to your computer, and they can get all your passwords for your bank accounts and all that kind of stuff. So if you see it, it'll have the logo on there, the PayPal logo, the Amazon logo. It's all BS. It's folks from, a lot of times from India now. Used to be a lot from Nigeria. And so don't fall for it. Be skeptical. And particularly, they say call this toll-free number, and it's a 619 San Diego number, which is not a toll-free number. So there's so many clues that it's a fraud.
If you see email from me saying I need the money, send it.
Send it.
But anyway, we'll be back here next week. I want to thank Teresa, Henry, Jim. Thanks for sitting in. Yeah, good.
Thanks to Vanessa.
And our guests, Eric Brown and Keith Johnson. Keith always used to call the show when we were on the radio.
Right.
Yeah, so
sure.
we get to see them in person. I thank them for coming down to McShane's. Thank you, Bob, for having us here. Allan Lengel. Thanks, bro.
All right, man.
Okay.
All right. So.